What's it like when you find that you've got to go effectively kind of have a job interview with Steven Spielberg?
It was intense. It was for real. And I live in Vermont. I live in the East Coast of the United States, where it is very, very cold in the winter. And it was February of 2013. It was like late February, and I remember actually sitting on my chair in my office, and I look out onto this, all of this snow, and it was snowing outside, and we got this call, and it was Frank Marshall, and Frank and I talked about it for a while, and it went very well, and I had been told, like, you're pretty much one of one, like this is the choice, and they're going to bring you in and make sure you're not crazy. And that's
you're
what
like,
it is.
I'm going to have to suppress it.
Yeah, like there wasn't. I know that they'd been talking to various people for about a year, but by the time it got to me, it was the decision, barring me completely fucking up, which makes it even more stressful. They're like, you got this until you don't. And so I flew out, and we sat down, and one of the very first things I said to him was, look, if this fails, then you continue on to be a legend of cinema, and I am finished. Like, I will disappear. And he had, and I said all of this to him, he had the privilege of being able to make a long series of original films, Sugarland Express and Duel, and then Jaws, and he built, and even from there, like, built up to something the size of this. I mean, this is a massive, massive undertaking, and I felt like, in a certain way, I was being robbed of that. I was being robbed of, and that sounds like a negative, but robbed of that right of a filmmaker to make a bunch of mistakes and learn from those mistakes. Yeah. And
it's getting it really soon in your career, that big film, which a lot of people get, like you say, fourth, fifth film in.
Right, yeah. And that's how it should be.
Yeah,
that's how it should be, and it's designed that way for a reason. And we have an interesting trend right now where this is happening, and I think it's probably the result of two things. One is that I think Mark Webb showed that it can work. He made very, very competent and entertaining Spider-Man movies, and I think all he had to do was show that it isn't a massive disaster, which it wasn't, for studios to say, oh, well, this makes a lot of sense. And I think there's, I don't know what level of control the other studios have over these younger filmmakers. There's this assumption that I was hired because I am easily controlled and manipulated by some kind of all powerful corporation. Not the reality at all. I mean,
it's parallel to the movie.
Yeah, but I mean, this is my director's cut that we're seeing in a couple weeks, and the studio was supportive, the whole time, and I didn't have them on set over my shoulder, and I wasn't getting notes. I had Steven, and that was a massive privilege. But back to the conversation, it was something that I knew I was going to do. I wasn't going to say no, and I never told them that I was going to say no until I read the script. And then I had to go back in, and I was like, you guys, if I don't understand this movie, and if I direct it, it's going to be a bad movie, because I can't do it.
So what state was it in? Because obviously it's 14 years, well, this year it's 14 years since Jurassic Park 3, and it's one of those movies that, even though it's been in development, we know a lot about it, because again, I think it taps into the fact that even though it's not been one for a while, people are really interested in the series because probably a strong emotional attachment to the original. We know a lot about kind of the various iterations, the John Sayles script, and Joe Johnston saying he's not director, Sam Neill saying he's coming back, he's not coming back, same with Richard Attenborough. Like, what was the kind of situation it was in when you came on board?
I read Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver's script once. I read it. It was funny. They brought me in, and there was a whole production office that was up and going, and they were ready. We were shooting like in 3 or 4 months, and they slid the script across the table. I'd already been hired, and I hadn't read it yet, and they were like, check this out, and then come in tomorrow morning. And I read it, and I certainly don't want to make it any kind of like negative about them as writers, just as I would never insult William Monahan, Oscar winner, or John Sayles, incredible independent filmmaker. It just wasn't anything that I knew how to do, and it actually it helped to define for me that I I really do have a clear voice, and I do have a way that I want to make films, and I can't just be plugged in to anything. As a director for hire, I probably won't be that good, and so I had to go back in and say, look, Derek and I can take these three fundamental ideas that were Steven's, which were an open functional park, awesome idea. This idea, raptors not necessarily running through the jungle like that on a motorcycle, but a character who has a relationship with raptors that is somewhat similar to guys who stick their heads in the mouths of lions and are trying to train and communicate with them, and the idea, and this guy, this girl actually, that there would be a dinosaur that was bigger and badder than anything before, and that would escape and threaten everyone in the park. In that particular script, this dinosaur was claimed that it was a real dinosaur that was found. It was found in China, and that I actually had a big problem with right away, because I didn't want to make up a new dinosaur and tell kids it's real. Because that all of these movies have been based, for better or for worse, in real paleontology. These were all real dinosaurs, even if many of them look different than we know they would. And so that was one of the first things that I said is, no, we have to at least say this is a genetically created hybrid of something if we're going to make up something new. And so there was this weird period of time where because there was a whole production office, because we were moving forward, I went a little rogue and I said, look, Steven, Derek and I, if you can just put us in a hotel, we're going to go write a new movie that can also be called Jurassic Park 4, and we'll do it very quickly. And if you like that movie, then I would be happy to make that. And it's been, I saw it reported that I said, I'm not going to do it, and that makes it sound very arrogant. It was more like, let me show you what I can do, and then what I'll feel good doing. And so in 3 weeks, we wrote this movie. Started completely from scratch, but held on to those ideas, and also held on to, what was also already there was the gyrosphere idea, and that little moment, the gyrosphere getting in between this girl and the ankylosaurus. It was a different dinosaur at the time, but I love the ankylosaurus, and I thought that would be a cool thing to use. But the characters, Claire and all of this, Vincent D'Onofrio's character, that storyline, we wrote something that we felt could very much be ours, and we brought it back in, and Steven read it, and I remember he placed his hand on it, and he was like, this is Jurassic Park 4. I was like, all right. That was like the one day where we were just, we felt good. You don't have a lot of days where you get to, be the kid in the commercial that runs out and jumps up in the air and it frees frames.
If Spielberg says he's okay with your script, that's kind of one of those days.
It was one of those days.
Quite a good day.
It was a good day, and let me be clear, he was down, and just because it was a complete, reinvention of it, he was down with the reinvention. We still worked on that stack of paper for 6 months with him, and it's. I haven't gone back and read our original draft. It's very, very similar, but the last 10 to 15% of something is really all of it, and just taking it and making it for something to work on all of the levels of comedy, horror, thriller, adventure, romance, everything that this is. It needs that amount of time, and that was why we postponed the movie, is that we handed this into the studio and they saw what we wanted to do, and they realized that we were shooting in 3 months, and by the time we actually shut it down, it was 1 month. It was crazy. It was just crazy, but I wasn't the one who could stop it. Steven was the only one who could stop it, and luckily he has that power, and he did, and the studio supported it, and it allowed us to take the script we had, which was, I think that was May of 2013. We worked all summer with Steven. We had those transcribed story conversations. I'm sure you've read the one with him and Kasdan and George, and so I remember that was another one of those days where I got one of those where they sent me the transcription. It said SS : in his paragraph CT DC, and that was awesome. I was like, I have a transcript. That was very cool.